on, Bears fans? Another edition of the Chicago Bears podcast coming your way. Pat the Designer, Tyler Rocky sitting in here on a Tuesday. We got mock drafts everywhere, Tyler. Everybody's all mocked up right now, and Mel Kiper dropping an interesting mock that I think is he's absolutely out of his mind on this one. And PFF coming with a solid mock draft as well. We got to break down both of those and just talk about some of the Bears moves that they made in free agency and why they should go certain directions. All that more in today's episode of the Chicago Bears podcast. Hit that like button, subscribe to the page, leave a 5-star review. Y'all know what to do. What's going on, Tyler? How you feeling, my guy?
How you doing, Pat? I heard you've been trying to get the golf itch going too.
Yeah, I'm taking golf a little more serious this year, trying to scratch that itch a little bit. I know Tyler Rocky, of course, our resident host of the golf show. So listen, I need as many tips as I can get. What's a good goal for like first year taking it seriously?
Good goal. I would say just here's my tip that I would give to everyone who's just starting.
Don't give me the have fun tip either, because I already know I'm going to be obsessive on this.
It's not fun. It's frustrating. It's frustrating. Don't try to hit every shot in the hole, which is what I think a lot of like beginning golfers try to do.
Yeah.
They just think every shot that they hit, they're trying to hit it in the hole. No, there's strategy. Like play a little bit more conservatively when you're starting, when you're learning, because you're going to make mistakes, but you don't want to compound those mistakes. Because when you don't have, like when you're still developing your skills and stuff like that, you're kind of like, you'll end up compounding more mistakes, and you don't want to do that. That's the last thing you want to do, because that's the difference. If you just try to play safer, you'll shave 15, 20 strokes easy. It's the easiest like shaving of strokes you'll ever have in your golf is going from like 120 to like 105.
Yeah.
And then the next easiest is like 105 to 95. And then just progressively gets harder. And that's when you really hate yourself. So
that's when it never becomes a fun activity. It's always the obsessive hobby.
Exactly.
Hey, I can't wait. It's going to be a fun summer. They gave us a taste of summer. Chicago gave us a little taste and then immediately took it back. But we'll see what do we end up when I finally am able to get out there a little bit more consistently. Hey, we do want to let you guys know Chicago Bears podcast is brought to you by the Advantage Auto Dealer Group. Find your next Chevy, Toyota, and Acura drive off in under 60 minutes, or they'll make your first car payment. Also brought to you by Hard Rock Casino in Northern Indiana. Las Vegas style gaming, just 30 minutes from Soldier Field, exit 6, right off of I-80-94. All right, Tyler, speaking of taking swings here, the Chicago Bears got to take some serious swings in the draft because they addressed a lot of things, but there's still things that I think need to be fixed on this team, especially, and I'm still in the trenches. I'm not going after the running back at 10. Are you a Jeanty 10 guy? Or
no. Hell no. I'm with you, man. Pat, listen, like this team's done a lot of good things this offseason, but I still think that there's a glaring hole along the defensive line. I know they made additions, but I still think there's plenty of work to do on the defensive line.
So you may enjoy the Mel Kiper mock draft a little bit more than I did, because I look at the other side of that line and say, why stop building? But at number 10 right now, the Chicago Bears are going Mykel Williams in Mel Kiper's mock draft here. He said, I've gone offensive line for the Bears in both of my previous mocks, but that box was checked in free agency. Chicago traded for guards Joe Tooney and Jonah Jackson, then signed center Drew Dahlman. And while the Bears also added Dio Odangbo and Grady Jarrett on the defensive front, they could still use someone like Williams coming off of the edge. They ranked in the middle of the pack last season as sacks 40, but were 24th in pass rush win rate at 36.5. Williams is a toolsy prospect. Toolsy, I mean, that's a word to keep in there, who can beat blockers with his speed or power. He missed time with an ankle injury early in the season, but still picked up 5 sacks. Given a little more time to develop, he could really be a solid NFL edge rusher. And on the surface, that sounds great. But as you go through 1 through 9, there's a very big name that I think is missing. And it's why it's kind of tough for me to be all in on Mykel Williams. Let's start here, though. When you hear the name Mykel Williams at 10, of course, co-host of the College Tailgate Show for us here at ESPN 1000. What are your thoughts on the Bears going there at 10? feels like a little bit of a reach to me.
Yeah, I don't mind the player. My whole thing would be every single offensive lineman in Mel's mock draft is still on the board. And if that's the case, if I have my pick of the litter of offensive line, I'm going offensive line. I just think that for as much as you've done to bolster the offensive line, I'd still like to find your tackle of the future. And if you've got your first pick of offensive linemen out of all the teams in the draft, I would use it here because if everything's going to go well, if things are going to progress the way that we want things to progress for the Chicago Bears, you're not going to be drafting in the top 10 for the foreseeable future. You're hopefully drafting in the 20s for the bulk of it. And I think you've got a much better chance of finding your left tackle of the future inside the top 10, albeit there's no Joe Alt's or anything like that in this draft or Rashawn Slater. Like, I'm going out and I'm trying to find that left tackle if I get my pick of all of the guys. Let's say Will Campbell's off the board. Let's say Armand Membo's off the board. Then, all right, I want to go defense at that point. But if you're giving me any of the offensive linemen at my disposal at 10, I'm clearly going offensive line.
Yeah, and see that was my problem with Mel Kiper's mock draft. Armand Membo ends up going 11 to the San Francisco 49ers, who, if you're worried about taking the tackle, who's the pure tackle, that's Armand Membo. I mean, if the Niners take him, guess what? By the way, we've had multiple people on the show who have all said he can slot in at left tackle and be absolutely fine in the NFL. And because you're starting him off at that spot, he'll be able to adjust to it fairly quickly. But you got Armand Membo coming off the board at 11. You've got Will Campbell coming off of the board at 13. And I would assume that's because maybe people view him more as a guard than they do as a tackle. I think when you watch Will Campbell's tape, he's a tackle, arm length be damned. You know what I mean? Like, to me, when I look at him, he's so aggressive with getting into the chest of the defender. He always controls the line of scrimmage. He does not allow himself to get reset on a consistent basis. Like, I love the ability of Will Campbell still to play left tackle at the NFL level. And I love what he said about it. Listen, put on the tape and you tell me I'm not a left tackle. Yeah, I don't see a guard when it comes to Will Campbell, maybe a little bit more with Kelvin Banks than anything. And I would say, if the Bears are in the market for that left tackle kind of upgrade that Will Campbell could be, and maybe he's not a Joe Alt with all the measurables and things like that, where he's a surefire tackle, but look at the tackles that Ben Johnson had in Detroit. They didn't have massive arm length and all of the traits that a tackle has to have. They were guys who did have shorter arms. They were guys who did have better footwork, who did have better ability to be able to pad set and different things like that. Like, to me, the conversation on leaving Will Campbell on the board is absolutely asinine. It's got to be one of the worst things that I've seen Mel Kiper mock in a long time.
Well, you brought up the Lions tackles. I'll bring up another name. Like, Rashawn Slater's got shorter arms too. That guy's a hell of a tackle in the NFL. So I feel like we're maybe getting to that point now with these left tackles and just tackles in general, where maybe the traits aren't all there physically, but just let the tape speak for itself. And I think Will Campbell is one of those prime candidates where positionally you'll figure him out if you just flip on some film.
Yeah, 100%. I looked at this and to me, I do like the name Mykel Williams, but again, like, feels a little high if you're the Chicago Bears. Now, I don't think that you can't or you shouldn't address the defensive line in this, Tyler. Like, to me, if you get to that second round or even later in the first round where, I mean, he has the Bears taking Mykel Williams here, I would think that Mykel Williams is still on the board if the Bears don't take him 10, around that 18, 19, 20 range, because of how I think the board would end up falling out. Trade back into the first round. I think that's a conversation that a lot of Bears fans, because of how this draft is, aren't as willing to have, because you want to have more players, more opportunities, more picks on the players. But if you get two blue chip pieces in this draft, and I think there are a couple of those, maybe blue chip's a little high, right? But if you get two pieces that you know are going to be really, really good to great level starters in this draft, and it's two in the first round, I'd take that over having one really good player, and maybe you look at some of the guys in the second round and say they're solid, but they're not going to be great.
I would say if this was a year ago, I would have been a little more inclined for something like that. But the way that this draft has kind of shook out, like I'd rather have more bullets in the second round than take a stab at one guy, because I feel pretty good that you'll find at least one guy in the second round that can hit, just because of the depth of this draft. I'm not saying they're going to be a superstar. I don't know how many superstars are going to come out of this draft. I just think this draft has a lot of solid to good players. And it's not to say that this is a bad draft. I don't think this is a bad draft. I just think it doesn't have quarterbacks. And that's the reason why we talk about it the way that we do. Like last year, it was quarterbacks galore. This year, we're trying to pigeonhole Jackson Dart into the first round. Like, I don't.
I'm seeing him top 10, Tyler. I'm seeing him top 10 in places.
I think I saw him the other day, like a second or a third overall. Like, it was crazy the way that quarterbacks were going off the board. Which, like, listen, good for the Bears. If the more quarterbacks in that top 10, the better. But I would say this with in terms of the second round, like I'd rather hold on to both of those second round picks and get two guys out of that, as opposed to trading back in. And especially with someone like Mykel Williams, who, like you mentioned, you brought up Toolsy. Toolsy is just a synonym for raw, undeveloped guy. Probably needs a little more seasoning in the NFL. Especially in this era of college football, I'd rather take chances on guys who were there 4 years, unless they were like a 3-year stud.
Yeah. And listen, I think you bring up a good point. I've said multiple times, right? Like, this is a draft that, because it doesn't have the quarterback names, it reminds me a little bit of that 2016 NFL draft. And to me, I think that's the one where you kind of look at it and you see a bunch of really, really good pieces that maybe you're not going to say are the best pieces available, but I mean, you've got some top level NFL players in there after Ezekiel Elliott, after Jared Goff, after Carson Wentz come off of the board. DeForest Buckner ends up going in that draft. Ronnie Stanley ends up going in that draft. Laramie Tunsil goes 13 because he had a weed mask on. Think about that, was 10 years ago. That was you couldn't get caught with a weed mask. It's such a different world.
The crazy thing is like there's a section of people on social media who see that and don't know what it means.
Bro,
like that's when I realized, like, oh, I graduated to a new tier of life. If you don't understand the Ronnie Stanley, the Laramie Tunsil mask, we are not the same.
Dog, it was such a weird time. I remember like the people just losing their minds. Oh, you can't trust them to be on the field. I was like, because of a weed gas mask? Like, I think I trust them more to be on the field. I was upset when the Bears again didn't take him.
Is like, and like, I think it's come out like he's wearing a mask. How do we know it's even him? Like the day that that comes out, how's the GM just like, we've seen this guy play? Like, how do we even know this is him?
Yeah, 100%.
Like who's trying to ruin this guy's life right now?
Dog, and you look at the Laramie Tunsil mask incident. Ryan Kelly ends up going in that draft. That is what this draft feels like. I just need Mason Graham to throw a mask on. See, you got to up it too much though. Now you can't just throw a weed mask on. You know what I mean? Now you got to go like
bank robber mask on.
You know what I mean? Or we call them popping perkies. Yeah, I don't need that. That now we're actually hindering things on the field. You know what I'm saying? No, but to me, this is a very similar kind of situation for the Bears here, where I like the idea of having more bullets, but if you tell me that later on in the draft, around the 27 range, there's a player like Kenny Clark on the board that I could draft back in and have that type of talent in there. And I think there are some of those guys later on in this draft as you go down the big board. Dare I say, I thought that one of the names that PFF threw out there would be that guy. But it feels like if you can find those pieces that you can guarantee, or that you feel the best about, as this guy's going to turn into something dominant in this league, which I think there are those names at the end of this first round, I'd be willing to take that chance.
Well, we know Ryan Poles loves trading away those second round picks too, and he's got a couple of them at his disposal now. So I could see it. It's just not the route I would go. I think there's too much depth, and I think you've got a very rare situation where this is like the last fruits of that trade with Carolina that are coming your way. I would still just hang with those 2 second rounders, maybe even trade back and try to get more. But I just look at, you have the ability right now to build very cheap depth for your football team, which is going to be very important for the foreseeable future, especially when I fully expect guys like Kyler Gordon to extend this offseason. You're still going to have some cap space. Maybe you make some signings next offseason. I just think that right now is a time when you're trying to get as many cheap assets as possible. And second round picks are one of the best ways to do that.
Yeah, listen, that is true. There's opportunity for you to do that where in the second round you can still get some really solid pieces. I think one of the names that is flying up the boards here apparently for PFF is one that I actually expect probably to be there in the second round, but you never know here. PFF going a little bit of a different direction, still going with that edge rusher in all of this. And hit that like button if you have not done so. Subscribe to the page. Let us know in the comments below. Would you be in on going after a defensive end or one of those defensive pieces that's at the top there, like Mel Kiper stated in Mykel Williams, with Armand Membo and Will Campbell still on the board? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Donovan Ezeiruaku, the name that the PFF mock draft is going with here, top 10 to the Chicago Bears, said after beefing up their offensive line in free agency, the Bears look for a defensive lineman to wreak havoc on opposing quarterbacks. Ezeiruaku posted a 90 PFF overall grade in 2024 to pair with 14 sacks and 20 quarterback hits. His 18.2% pass rush win rate was one of the best in college football, and he should provide the Bears with a badly needed disruptor on the edge. Now, Tyler, from everything that I've seen until this point, Donovan has basically been a second round pick, high second round, somewhere right where we slate the Bears kind of being 39-41 range. But this is the first time I'm really seeing them shoot up the draft boards like this. I mean, is this a reach? I mean, this feels like a complete reach, and I understand it all works. If it all works, none of it's a reach, but the numbers look great, but it is Boston College.
It's Boston College, but here's the one thing I would say about Boston College. The staff that they brought in this year was an NFL staff. Bill O'Brien takes over the helm. You bring in Tim Lewis, who was a 7-year defensive coordinator in the NFL. Like Bill O'Brien was running that thing like an NFL team. And when you brought that coaching staff in and you saw that leap in production, I don't know about you, but I trust Dennis Allen a hell of a lot. Yeah. And if I let Dennis Allen get his hands on him after seeing that level of production spike, and not to mention the fact that the guy that recruited him to Boston College is Jeff Hafley, who's now a defensive coordinator in the NFL.
Yeah.
So guys that have eyes for NFL talent, I kind of trust that. Now, is that the guy I want at 10? Probably not. I'd rather try to move back in the draft if that's the guy you really have your eye on. However, I kind of trust that bringing a guy like him in to a Dennis Allen defense would work out pretty well for the long term. Because, like, I don't know how you feel, but listen, Dennis Allen, I don't think is getting another crack at an NFL head coaching job. Like, I think this very well could be, if everything goes well with the Bears, this could be their version of Spags, guy who's just going to be there for a while. This could be their version of Vic Fangio, guys that just aren't getting another crack at it as a head coach. And if you let him be a guy that can learn under Dennis Allen, there's not going to be a ton of pressure for him to produce in year one. You can maybe let him develop a little bit. That's a guy that I would really be into.
No, listen, I agree with you. And I feel like that is the excitement of going into this draft with Dennis Allen, right? Is the fact that you know that he's going to be a long-term piece here. It does feel like he's, you mentioned Spags. I think that's a great name to compare him to, of course, Vic Fangio, where you've seen the failures a couple of times now at the head coaching position. I mean, if you go out there and you put on a masterful performance, maybe you see him get another opportunity, or somebody just needs some of that stability that he may bring. Maybe you see him get another opportunity. But it's one of the reasons I'm excited about him being with Ben Johnson is there's going to be some stability on this team finally, right? I've got my offensive guy. I've got my defensive guy. It feels like that's going to be the long term of this team. Now, when I look at Donovan, I like the fact that there's going to be some time and opportunity for him to develop here. I think that, you know, if Dennis Allen goes out and wants this guy, he's beating the table for him at 10. All right, let's have a conversation on this. But again, I think the conversation is kind of still the same, where it really depends on how the offensive line falls here. To me, I haven't seen Armand Membo end up in the top 10 of anybody's mock draft just yet. It doesn't seem like teams are looking at him as a top 9 pick. Now, number 10 to the Bears has kind of been the conversation around him. if he's still on the board. I think even if there's a Josh Simmons on the board, I'd be more willing to take that chance there, because the one thing that this draft does have a ton of is the edge rusher position.
Yeah.
I think there's guys that you can find in the second round that still can be extremely impactful, that fit what Dennis Allen wants to do. I don't think this isn't a draft, and I've said this a couple of times about the offseason. It's conjunction junction and button or. I don't know if you remember that. That was Schoolhouse Rock back in the day. Yeah, what's your function? You had your or off season last year where you chose wide receiver or offensive line. You went wide receiver. This needs to be your and off season. I think that you can go get a big name at the top of this draft and get one of the tackles that continues to answer his question in the trenches. And you can still get one of the guys that can be an elite pass rusher that Dennis Allen is still going to be able to do a ton of work with on the defensive side of this thing early in that second round. For me, and I don't know how you feel about this, Tyler, but the running back conversation doesn't even start for me until we start to look at the third round, especially with how Ryan Pohl's third round picks have gone. I feel like running back may be the safest pick for in that third round. But like, I'm looking to address as much of the trenches as I can with these first three picks.
I would be the same way too. Like I do think there is a need for running back, but I think the depth, the running back position. Now maybe you trade back from one of those second round picks, and if you are going later in the second round while also accumulating another asset on top of that, then I'd be looking at a second round running back a little bit harder. But I agree with you. Like if you could knock out offensive line in the first round of this draft, the depth at defense, so many people have said it, just how many edge rushers, how many interior guys that you can find in this draft. Like those are the guys that I would really be eyeing in the second round. And I think there's not as much pressure on those guys to start from day one because of the additions that you've made in the offseason. You can work them in a little bit more rotationally, maybe even get Austin Booker a little bit more into that mix as well, see what he has in his second year in the NFL too. So I just think that the depth that you're going to find second round in terms of defensive linemen is going to be far better than what kind of depth you're going to find offensive lineman wise. This is going to be a really interesting top 10 to me because it could go a number of ways. I mean, we don't even know who's going to pick first at this point.
Yeah.
Like, is it going to be the Giants that trade up? Is it going to be the Titans? Like, how many quarterbacks are going to find their way inside the top 10? Where's Ashton Jeanty going to go? How are the offensive linemen going to shake out too? Which offensive linemen is it going to be too? And what's the ordering of them? Like you've got like 4 or 5 offensive linemen now that have kind of been booted around as like the top names and first round type of guys. They could go in any order. Like there are very few orders that would truly surprise me among the offensive linemen. We see it shuffle every week, and maybe it's just the smokescreen season nature that we're in right now, but I'd rather roll the dice and bet on one of those offensive linemen that you like being available at 10. It's just going to matter. It's just going to be a matter of whether or not Ryan Poles is ready to move on from Braxton Jones or if he's going to give him a prove it year.
Listen, I mean, just about every season since year 2 has been a prove it year, but I do think that is going to be the big part of this is, where's the love on Braxton Jones? And there seems to be a lot of love around the Braxton Jones market. And I will say this, and I said this on the pod yesterday with Shay. Braxton Jones is going to get better this year. With Joe Tooney next to him, Braxton Jones, like that ceiling that Braxton Jones has hit over the past couple of years is going to actually go up because one, it feels like the Bears are going to be much heavier in the run game, much more of a run heavy team this season while still trying to incorporate Caleb Williams and all of that. But it's going to be started with the run. That's where Braxton Jones is best fit. Yeah, that's where his game is best utilized. He is not a great pass blocker, but in the run blocking game, when you get Braxton out in space, you get him moving, he can run people over. There have been that's been the exciting part of his game week in and week out. Now, do we need to see better out of it? 100%. But it does feel like this may be an offense that maybe is a little more fitting to making Braxton Jones work here. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw that, but I do think that it might be a little irresponsible to not try and upgrade that position. Or, I mean, the Karan Amagaji part of it is kind of plays into all of this as well, too, though, doesn't it? Like you drafted this kid in the third round last year. Are you just giving up on him? Are you going with one of these top left tackles here? Like that part does play into all of this as well.
I just think when two things. off of the Kron Amagashi thing, you have Darnell Wright, who you drafted in the top 10. Like, that should be an anchor for you moving forward.
Yes.
How often are you finding your starting left tackle in the 3rd round?
Yeah.
Like, starting left tackles, usually you find them in the earlier, like, first, sometimes second rounds. And then I would just look at the other side. Like, if you're not taking a tackle this year, whether it's in the 1st round or 2nd round, if you're not investing in the left tackle spot this year, you're making a really big bet on Braxton Jones. Like, a really big bet.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's where I want to be with a guy like Braxton Jones. I want to live with something a little bit more sure. And that's not to say Braxton's not a good player. He might be a fine player in this league, but durability is an issue with him too. Like, people give a lot of flack to Tevin Jenkins. Braxton Jones missed more games over the last 2 years than Tevin Jenkins has. So I would start to look at the durability thing. And I know he's got this moniker of like, oh, he's like some Cal Ripken Iron Man because he played every snap his rookie season. But that has been far from the case the last 2 years.
11 games, 2023, 12, 2024.
Yeah, like I need to see more availability, especially at a position that's so critical in the offensive line.
And what's really going on there? We keep hearing, right, when Schefter has talked about it, when Kiper is talking about it, everyone keeps going. Even when we had Jordan Reed on, what's going on with Braxton Jones's ankle? Like, what do you know that as far as I know, he broke his ankle. He had surgery. It should be fine.
Yeah.
We keep hearing all these people just go, we need to know how healthy is Braxton Jones. Like,
is that the smoke screen? Is that the smoke screen being thrown out there by the Bears right now that, hey, we need a left tackle. We need to just let everyone know that we're good with our guy that we've got now, and maybe they come falling back and no one's looking to trade up for one.
Could be the possibility of that is there, but it's just I now, like, it's been asked so much now, Tyler. I'm like, what is going on with Braxton Jones? Does somebody know something that we don't hear? Because I expected him to be back here to start the season. The one thing that I will say about all of this, though, is the Bears have a unique opportunity here on either side of the ball. And there's not much. Listen, if you go with an edge rusher on the defensive side of 10, perfect. If you go with a left tackle on the offensive side of 10, perfect. There's not much that the Bears can do here where I'm like, oh, wow, you really missed on that, because I do think, like you said, and like it's been described, this is a very meat and potatoes kind of draft. You're going to be able to find pieces. The question is there that, do you trust Ryan Poles scouting his eye enough to feel like at that top 10 spot, he's finding that gem that everybody's looking for? That's kind of what it comes down to here. Is Ryan Poles going to start drafting things where it seems like they fit? Because you mentioned that 3rd round. Listen, there's a ton of good 3rd round players, but you got to find them. You can't ignore them. And that's been one spot where Ryan Poles has been absolutely god awful at. In the 1st round, there's been some hits. You've been high in the draft. It makes it a lot easier to hit when you're that high in the draft. The 2nd round is going to be extremely important for you. And while I feel like Javon Dexter took a step, and there's another step for him to take, especially in Dennis Allen's offense, was that the right call to go Darnell Wright over Jalen Carter when you're trying to turn Javon Dexter into Jalen Carter? Yeah.
Well, listen, Ryan Poles is making his 4th top 10 pick in the last 3 years. His 4th. Like, you should be building something towards not just a winner, but like one of those top tier teams when you're making that many, especially in some of the drafts that we've seen too. Like, you had 2 in the top 10 last year in a draft that some people think is going to be one of the better ones that we will ever see in the NFL. Like, those are the ones that you need to hit on, especially when you're inside the top 10. I think he's got a good chance to do that, but when you've got these 1st round picks year after year after year, like, look at the best teams in the NFL and who they find in the 1st round. It's constant hits. Constant hits. And you're not only drafting in the 1st round, you're drafting in the top 10 perennially, it seems like. This should be the last time you draft in the top half of the NFL draft for the foreseeable future. It really should be. The way that you're building this thing, you should not be even sniffing a top 10 pick.
That's the hope. That's the hope. Hopefully, we see the Bears do that here in this draft coming up. Some of the news that we do got to get off of the docket here because the Bears did make a couple of moves, and well, they made one move, and they brought in some interesting names yesterday to possibly make another move, but I don't know if that's going to happen now. Travis Homer re-signed yesterday. With a running back yet again signed here. You've now got 3 running backs on the roster. We talked about the Ashton Jeanty conversation a little bit here, but does bringing Travis Homer kind of take Jeanty off the table for you at 10? Does that make you feel comfortable enough kind of in that running back room? I would expect you're still going to see some Roschon Johnson. Ian Wheeler's a name that me and J-Mac loved last season. He ended up getting hurt. Is he going to be able to come back? Of course, you've got Swifty at the top of that list right now. And now you're adding Travis Homer into the mix.
I don't think so. I mean, what you'd be asking Travis Homer and Ashton Jeanty to do would be 2 very different things.
Yeah.
You gave Travis Homer $2 million. If you have to cut him, you have to cut him. Like I can't imagine Travis Homer is going to be something that prohibits you from drafting a running back in any round, really. He's a special teams guy too.
Yeah.
And let's not forget, like the vet minimum for a guy of his tenure is about $1.2 million. So he's getting slightly above a veteran minimum. It feels like a largely inconsequential move. We've seen the Bears cut higher priced players before. Like, and I'm talking about after just signing him. Like, I think back to a couple of seasons ago when they signed PJ Walker.
I was just going to go there. Yeah.
They brought him in to be the backup quarterback. They ended up cutting him a couple months later because they really liked what they saw out of Tyson Bagent. So
he was also awful.
Oh yeah. Like
that
I know you were at those training camps too.
That training camp is burned in my brain.
And listen, Justin was really never showed to be like anything special in the league so far from a passing standpoint. Like the disparity between Justin Fields as a passer versus PJ Walker as a passer, it was like top 25, like college football playoff quarterback versus high school freshman. It looked like.
For those of you who couldn't see it, go watch Will Howard's draft combine. That's what PJ Walker looked like. Like it got to a point, and I was excited about PJ Walker being signed. I was like, I love this. This is a great move. This is going to be, bro. I spent every day just going, I don't think he knows the plays.
Well, not even that. It was just like even the stationary stuff without any rush. Like when you're throwing the ball through the net, it was like, boy, this guy doesn't look like he's thrown a football before.
You know what it looked like? I mean, this is another bad it looked like, go watch the All-Star game and watch Wemby and Chris Paul doing the skills competition where they're shooting the ball. That's kind of what it looked like. It was bad, bro. Like it was that was a tough time. I remember just going, oh no. But we got Tyson Bagent out of it. The Homer, I do agree with you though. The Homer signing, I don't think changes anything. Travis Homer is so much more than a running back. Yeah. Travis Homer is a special teams. He's a 3-phase guy. You know what I mean? Like he is everything that you need. Just the utility guy to be. I love the fact that Travis Homer is back with this team. I think that he can be a running back, and you kind of forget that because of all the other things that he does so well. To me, I think that Travis Homer this guy is really good at his job. Let him just keep doing his job kind of signing. I don't think it changes anything for Jeanty if that's where you want to go.
I think this may say a little bit more about the future of Roschon Johnson than it does any sort of draft running back that you're going to be working with here. Because like, where does Roschon fit into this formula now? And we know he's had the issues with concussions too. Yeah. Like that's a guy who I think a lot of Bears fans were very excited about when he was drafted. And I don't think he's delivered a whole heck of a lot on the field. No. He's been good in like the short yardage, one yard thing. But if you can find that back anywhere, anywhere.
Cam's got like third round.
Yeah, like find one of those guys then. Like I think it actually may say a little bit more about Roschon than it does about any sort of draft prospect you may bring in.
That's so tough too, because I loved Roschon. First off, Ryan Poles, you hyped us all up on him. He's like, he's going to be a pillar of this team. A pillar? Like, I don't even know if he's a part of the foundation right now. He's not even the grout in the cracks right now. I love Roschon. And I wanted him to be more. The concussions really have just held him back. And listen, you can't be the kind of running back that Roschon is and have concussion issues. Like it's not going to make for a long career in the NFL. He's not an outside zone guy. He isn't up the gut guy. He's a gap runner, and
Well, he's not a speed guy either.
He's not a speed guy. I'm going to move you around. And I think that when you use him in those short yardage situations, I love him for those short yardage situations. We didn't see enough of that last season. I can argue, just like I can argue for almost everybody on this team, Roschon was used improperly last season. But you can't be the short yardage, go in the pile and move everybody out of the way guy. And every single season you've been in the NFL, you've missed 4 or 5 weeks due to concussion issues. That's just, it's not going to work for the team overall. I thought something else that was interesting. We've talked about the Bears wanting to add speed to this team. Couple of names brought in yesterday, but one that was very interesting at the that I think shocked a lot of Bears fans. Rondale Moore, who dealt with injury last season, brought in. Now, if you remember, Rondale Moore drafted to the Arizona Cardinals. I believe 4.2 speed at the draft combine. To me, when you talk about your slot receivers, I think Zacchaeus kind of has that locked up right now as your number 3 guy. But if you're talking about a take the top off guy and you're going to need a special teams returner on this team, Rondale Moore is a name that really intrigues me.
Yeah, when I saw that, and I feel like maybe his draft pedigree and that final season that he had at Purdue maybe warp a lot of perception of what he's been in the NFL. Like, he's been a fine player.
Yeah.
Definitely underwhelming from what he was supposed to be. I mean, you're talking about a second-round receiver, but he's got the speed. What does that speed look like coming off of a pretty debilitating injury? We'll see. But I like where your head's at with the punt returner part of it, because that's something that I think the Bears still need to figure out. And punt returner, albeit you just need more of a sure-handed guy than a guy that can really flip the field, just because of the way that punters are in the NFL right now. They're so good that you don't really see a lot of punt returns in the first place. But Rondale Moore is another guy. Like, you brought in Zacchaeus, who can be a guy that can make guys miss because of speed. And I think Rondale Moore, it's a flyer worth taking. It's not going to cost you much. Like, it's something that I think Ben Johnson, let him mold the clay a little bit here, and maybe you find something.
Another name that was brought in yesterday, Tom Pelissero dropped this nugget as well. Mykel Hardman had a visit with the Chicago Bears yesterday, and Mykel Hardman's been somebody who, I mean, due to injuries, different things, has kind of fallen out of favor, of course, in Kansas City. But he was somebody who early on, as far as a receiver, as that number 3 guy, as somebody who could fill in, was really someone who Patrick Mahomes was relying on there. That slot guy, I believe 6 touchdowns his rookie year. He's got 16 touchdowns in his career overall. Would you rather have a Rondale Moore or a Mykel Hardman in this situation, knowing kind of Mykel's dealt with some of the injuries and different things that have gone on with him?
Yeah, I think it's a no-brainer. I'd much rather deal with Rondale Moore and try to bring him into the building. Like, Mykel Hardman, I feel like his best days are behind him. He had 90 yards as a whole last year. You've really seen his production drop off. That's someone that I think that I'm good on. I think his best days are well behind him. And if you could not crack last year's Chiefs receiver rotation with all the injuries and guys who were in and out of the lineup too, like, to me, if you couldn't crack that rotation there, you probably don't have a lot of shelf life in the NFL left.
Yeah, listen, it's been a good run. He's got 2 championships out of it, I believe.
Yeah. And like, he's a guy who had chemistry with Pat Mahomes too. Like, if you had chemistry with Pat Mahomes and you couldn't crack that rotation last year, you probably don't have much use left.
That random jet season just really stop doing random jet seasons, players. To all football players out there, Justin Fields, I hope it works out well for you. I'm terrified for you with the random jet season here, brother. Like, those are usually the years where it's like you come back and it's like, remember that guy? And he was talented. That's tough to see. I'm with you. I know Rondale Moore dealt with the injury last season, didn't play a single game in the NFL last year, but I would rather see Rondale Moore. I'd rather take a flyer on Rondale Moore because of the speed, the ability. And he's one of those guys who one cut and he can be gone. And there's not many of those guys in the NFL, especially with that 4.2 speed. So I'd be very interested to see what the Bears did there, taking a flyer on them. I think listen, there's some interesting moves for the Bears to make out here. It's going to be interesting to see what they do in the draft. And of course, some of the moves that they can still make, the small moves they still make in free agency. Tyler, appreciate you coming through to the pod, my guy. What you got coming up for all the fans out here to watch?
Well, you know that it's tournament time. So going to be a lot of college hoops over the course of the next couple of weeks. I'll be locked into that. Some golf stuff as well with the golf show, and then with Waddle and Sylvia as always. So
as always, make sure to stay tapped into Tyler Aki. Follow him everywhere at Tyler Aki, I believe. That's just underscore at
Tyler Aki underscore.
Tyler Aki underscore. I had it backwards.
There's only one other Tyler Aki in the world, and he sniped me on every username.
That's tough. Actually, what does he do? I feel like you know this guy personally.
I don't. All I know is he was a Florida State club lacrosse player. So that's straight out from Long Island. So
at least you got by an athlete. You know what I mean? At least you got by an athlete.
Lacrosse. I don't know.
No, don't do it like that. Hey man, we appreciate
keep the dream alive.
We appreciate you guys for tuning in and rocking with us as always, man. Hit that like button, subscribe to the page, leave a 5-star review. Y'all know what to do. For Tyler Aki, it's your boy Pat the Designer back at it again. Drop a bird down in the chat if you're rocking with the channel, man. Y'all stay safe out there, Chicago. Bird down, one love. Peace.